Today we're diving into 5 real stories of people who died in extremely silly ways. These tales are shocking, surprising, and a bit hard to believe. From bizarre accidents to unusual mishaps, these stories show how unpredictable life can be. Stay tuned as we explore these strange and tragic events. It was January 14, 2013 in Cantonment, Florida. James Campbell, a 68-year-old Vietnam veteran, had lived in the area for most of his life. He was well known and well liked, a loyal friend and family man with 2 children and 4 grandchildren. On this particular day, James and his partner, 56-year-old Iris Fortner, were returning to their home. The day was like any other until it turned into a tragic and unusual accident. James and Iris had just pulled up to their driveway in their 1995 Chevrolet van. As they approached the metal gates of their home, James stepped out of the passenger side to open the gates, allowing the vehicle to enter. Iris remained in the driver's seat, ready to back the van into the driveway once the gates were open. As James walked towards the gates, Iris opened her door to check on his position. In that moment, their dog, a large boxer bulldog, curious and excited, leaped into the front seat. The large dog accidentally pressed down on the accelerator. The van, which was in reverse gear, suddenly surged backward. Iris, caught off guard, tried desperately to stop the vehicle. She reached for the brake, but it was too late. The van backed into James, trapping him under its wheels. Emergency services were called immediately. Escambia County paramedics arrived quickly, but there was little they could do. James Campbell was pronounced dead at the scene. The impact had been severe, and despite Iris's efforts, the accident was unavoidable. She suffered minor injuries but was not charged with any wrongdoing. The Florida Highway Patrol conducted an investigation into the incident. Reports confirmed the sequence of events. James had exited the van to open the gates. Iris had opened the door to check on his position, and the dog had jumped into the driver's seat, inadvertently pressing the accelerator. The van had backed into James, resulting in his tragic death. Local news outlets covered the story extensively. The Pensacola News-Journal and North Escambia News reported on the unusual accident, showing the tragic nature of the events. Neighbors and friends expressed their condolences, sharing their grief and disbelief. Many described James, affectionately known as Bo, as a good friend and a devoted family man. He was a graduate of Tate High School and a veteran who had served in Vietnam. In the days following the accident, online forums and blogs were filled with messages of sympathy and support for Iris and James's family. One blogger, claiming to be a close friend of James, wrote a heartfelt tribute, recalling their friendship and James's generosity. He mentioned James's brothers, Charlie and Jim, and the close-knit bond they shared. Despite the overwhelming support, there were rumors of suspicion. Some individuals questioned the probability of the accident, suggesting that there might be more to the story. However, the official reports and eyewitness accounts left little room for doubt. It was a tragic accident, a series of unfortunate events that led to the loss of a beloved community member. The dog, who had unintentionally caused the accident, remained with Iris. The boxer bulldog was not blamed for its actions, as it had acted out of excitement and curiosity. It was October 2012 in São João de Meriti, a busy suburb of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Rejane Moreira Teles, a 23-year-old student nurse, had just started working at a local clinic. With only 3 days of experience, she was still learning the ropes. That day, 80-year-old Palmerina Pires Ribeiro was a patient at the clinic. Her family had recently celebrated her 80th birthday. Now she needed medical care. Rejane was responsible for administering an intravenous feed to Mrs. Ribeiro. However, the intravenous feed and a mixture of coffee with milk were placed next to each other. In a moment of confusion, Rejane mistakenly injected the coffee and milk mixture into Mrs. Ribeiro's veins instead of the intravenous feed. Rejane later explained on Brazilian TV Globo's Fantástico that the intravenous feed and the coffee mixture were next to each other, and anyone could have made the same mistake. She admitted she knew the risks of administering an intravenous feed, but insisted she had not been trained properly for the procedure. She said, "Anyone can get confused. I injected the coffee and I put it in the wrong place." Tragically, the mistake had severe consequences. The coffee and milk mixture went directly into Mrs. Ribeiro's heart and lungs. Doctors explained that it would have felt like suffocating. Dr. Armando Carrere, a nutritional specialist at the Federal University of Fluminense's Hospital Antonio Pedro, said the fluid would have caused the lungs to fill up, leading to a slow and painful death. Mrs. Ribeiro's daughter, Lorraine Ribeiro, witnessed the incident. She recalled, I saw my mother was agitated. She opened her mouth and this youngster put coffee with milk into the veins of my mother, half a glass. Mrs. Ribeiro died a few hours after the injection. The tragic incident led to Regine Morera Telles being charged with involuntary manslaughter. 2 other nurses and another student at the clinic were also indicted for their roles in the incident. Regine's defense was that she was not properly trained and that it was an understandable mistake. However, the case shows the critical importance of proper training and supervision in medical settings. Medication errors are unfortunately common in hospitals, but this case was particularly severe due to the fatal outcome. The clinic and its staff faced heavy scrutiny following the incident. The tragic death of Palmerina Pires Ribeiro shows the responsibilities that come with medical care and the devastating consequences of errors. It was a regular day in early February 2011 in Bradford, England. Brian DePledge, a 38-year-old father of 2, was going about his usual household chores. Brian lived peacefully, and his routine often involved taking care of his home and children. That day he was hanging wet laundry on a clothes horse, a simple, everyday task that many of us perform without a second thought. But for Brian, this normal activity turned into a tragic and fatal accident. Brian DePledge was known to his family and friends as a loving and easygoing person. He had an 18-year-old daughter, Shawnee, and an 11-year-old son, Ryan. Brian was looking forward to Shawnee's wedding in April, where he was supposed to give her away. He was also deeply connected to Ryan, who suffered from hydrocephalitis, a condition that affects the brain. Despite the challenges, Brian was devoted to his children and worked hard to provide for them. On that day, Brian was alone in his living room. He had just placed wet clothes on the drying rack, also known as a clothes horse. The clothes horse was an ordinary plastic drying rack, something found in many households. As he was arranging the clothes, he tripped over a small stool. This caused him to fall backward into the drying rack. Tragically, Brian's fall led to his neck becoming trapped between the bars of the rack. The accident happened quickly. Brian's immediate reaction was to free himself, but this only made things worse. As he struggled, the bars tightened around his neck and chest, creating what experts described as a cat's cradle effect. Detective Inspector Mark Long, who investigated the incident, explained that Brian's attempts to free himself unknowingly tightened the grip of the clothes horse. By pushing down on the bars, the rack closed like a concertina, making the situation more critical. The wet clothes on the rack added extra weight and pressure on Brian's neck, worsening the compression and making it even harder for him to breathe. Dr. Philip Batman, the consultant pathologist who performed the post-mortem examination, described the effects of the incident as similar to hanging. Brian's lungs were congested with excess fluid, a condition consistent with asphyxiation. Deep indentations were found on the right side of his chest and neck, indicating where the bars had pressed into his body. Blood was also found on Brian's face, suggesting that he had struggled intensely to free himself. The coroner, Professor Paul Marks, recorded a verdict of accidental death. He remarked that in his career, he had never come across a case like this. Brian's death was caused by an extraordinarily rare set of circumstances. Professor Marks noted that such a death was probably rarer than being struck by lightning or hit by a meteorite. Shawnee, Brian's daughter, was devastated by the loss of her father. She described him as a lovely, easygoing person who was always there for his family. Shawnee had a special bond with her father, often joking with him about her upcoming wedding. She remembered how they joked that he would kick her down the aisle to get rid of her. On her wedding day, Shawnee thought of her father and felt his presence with her, even though he wasn't physically there to give her away. Ryan, Brian's young son, struggled to understand his father's sudden death. His grandmother, June Evans, explained that Ryan kept asking when he could see his dad again. She tried to comfort him by telling him that his father was always with him in his heart. The family's grief was worsened by the bizarre and unexpected nature of Brian's death. Household accidents are common, but what happened to Brian DePledge was exceptionally rare. According to the Royal Society for the Prevention of Accidents, most household accidents involve falls, burns, cuts, and poisoning. However, the circumstances surrounding Brian's death underscore the unpredictability of accidents and the importance of being cautious, even during routine activities. When Brian fell into the clothes horse, his immediate instinct was to escape. This instinctive struggle only worsened the situation, leading to a vicious cycle where the more he fought, the tighter the bars became. This tragic scenario suggests the need for calmness and strategic thinking in emergencies, although maintaining such composure can be incredibly challenging in a panicked state. It was December 21, 2013, in McLeod, Oklahoma. Denver Lee St. Clair, a 58-year-old man, was found dead in his home in a way no one could have imagined. The police discovered his body with the waistband of his underwear pulled over his head. This unusual and disturbing method of death was later identified as an atomic wedgie. The person responsible for this act was his 33-year-old stepson, Brad Davis, a former Marine. The events that led to this shocking incident are as tragic as they are perplexing. Brad Davis had a troubled relationship with his stepfather, Denver Lee St. Clair. The tension between them had been brewing for years. St. Clair was known to be abusive and had a history of violence, especially towards his wife, Tressia St. Clair, who was Brad's mother. In 2008, Tressia filed a permanent protective order against Denver, claiming he had grabbed her by the neck and thrown her through a bathroom door. The couple had attempted to divorce multiple times, but the cases were often dismissed. This aggressive environment undoubtedly contributed to the strained relationship between Brad and his stepfather. On the night of December 21, 2013, Brad Davis visited his mother and stepfather's home. His mother, Tressia, was in the hospital recovering from hip surgery, leaving the two men alone. They spent the evening drinking, which only escalated the already tense atmosphere. According to Davis, the altercation began when Denver started bad-mouthing Tressia, which angered him. As the argument intensified, Denver allegedly tried to punch Brad. In response, Davis fought back. He claimed that his stepfather jumped him and that he acted in self-defense. The situation quickly spiraled out of control. During the struggle, Davis knocked Denver unconscious. In a moment of rage and desperation, Brad pulled the waistband of Denver's underwear over his head from behind, creating the infamous atomic wedgie. When the police arrived at the scene, they found Denver Lee St. Clair dead, with his underwear waistband wrapped around his neck. Potawatomi County Sheriff Mike Booth stated, "I'd never seen this before, but when we first looked at our victim, seeing the waistband of his underwear was around his neck." The initial examination revealed that Denver had died from suffocation and blunt force trauma to the head. Brad Davis initially tried to cover up his actions. He altered the crime scene to make it appear as if the two had simply had a fight. However, further investigation uncovered evidence suggesting that the situation was far more severe than a mere altercation. Text messages between Davis and a friend indicated that he had intended to confront Denver and had nothing to lose. This evidence, combined with the physical findings, led the authorities to believe that Denver's death was not accidental. Brad Davis was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. During the legal proceedings, Davis claimed that he never intended to kill his stepfather. He described the incident as a tragic accident, stating, "I never had any intention of killing that man. There's no way I ever thought that could have happened." He expressed that he was defending himself and that things had gotten out of hand in the heat of the moment. The case garnered significant media attention, and Davis was dubbed the Atomic Wedgie Killer. Prosecutors argued that Davis had acted with malice and that his actions went far beyond self-defense. They presented the text messages and the disturbing detail that Davis had taken photos of Denver while he lay unconscious on the floor. These actions painted a picture of intent to humiliate. In May 2015, Davis pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter as part of a plea deal to avoid a trial. During the mitigation hearing, he reiterated that he was panicked, mad, and scared, and that it was like a bad dream. He admitted that he had gone too far and expressed remorse for his actions. On July 16, 2015, Brad Davis was sentenced to 30 years in prison. The judge considered the severity of the crime and the evidence of Davis's intent to confront and humiliate his stepfather. The sentence reflected the court's belief that Davis's actions were not merely a tragic accident, but a result of years of built-up tension. The case left a lasting impact on the community and the families involved. Denver Lee St. Clair was remembered by his daughter, Carol St. Clair, and niece Tanya Renee Lester Dawson as a unique individual who loved motorcycles. They set up a Facebook page in his memory, where friends and family shared their grief and memories. The tragic events also led to a broader discussion about the dynamics of abusive relationships and the long-term effects of such environments on individuals. Brad Davis's case highlighted the extreme consequences that can arise from years of unresolved conflict and abuse. It was April 14, 2012, in Des Plaines, Illinois. Anthony Hensley, a 37-year-old husband and father of two, was working at Bay Colony Pond. Anthony's job involved managing mute swans to deter geese from the condominium complex where he worked. On this particular day, he was out on the pond in his kayak, performing his usual checks on the swans. It was a routine he had done countless times over the past 10 years, but this time, something went terribly wrong. Anthony was known for his dedication to his job and his family. He often shared his love for swans and his work with his two young daughters. His wife, Amy, remembered him as a devoted husband and father, always putting his family first. Anthony was also a skilled swimmer, a fact that would later puzzle many about the events of that day. On the morning of April 14th, Anthony set out in his kayak, paddling across the pond to check on the mute swans. These birds, while beautiful, are known for their aggressive and territorial nature. According to the lawsuit filed by Amy Hensley, the defendants knew or should have known that mute swans are strongly territorial with a dangerous tendency to attack. As Anthony approached one of the swans, it suddenly became aggressive. Witnesses later recounted how the swan lunged at Anthony, causing his kayak to tip over. He fell into the cold water, fully clothed and wearing heavy boots. The swan did not back down. It continued to attack, lunging at Anthony and preventing him from swimming to shore. His clothes and boots, now waterlogged, made it difficult for him to stay afloat. Anthony resurfaced at least once, struggling to swim against the weight of his clothes and the relentless attacks of the swan. But the aggressive bird kept lunging at him, pushing him further underwater. Eyewitness Daniel Gamanov, who watched the incident from his apartment window, said, "They probably thought that he was going too close to their eggs, and they were too scared, and they just attacked him." By the time dive crews arrived, Anthony had been underwater for more than 30 minutes. The pond was 50 feet deep in some areas, making the search even more challenging. Despite their efforts, Anthony was pronounced dead at Advocate Lutheran General Hospital. The Cook County Medical Examiner's Office concluded that he had drowned and ruled his death an accident. The aftermath of Anthony's tragic death left his family devastated. His father, Raymond Hensley, spoke to the media, describing his son as a wonderful father and husband. "It's tragic for him to have to spend the last few moments like that," he said. "He's going to be remembered as one of the most wonderful fathers in the world. A very good father, a very good husband. There wasn't a mean bone in his body." Anthony's stepmother, Tammy Hensley, supported Raymond's sentiments. "We are all very upset, but I can't stop thinking about his two daughters," she said. The family struggled to cope with the loss, unable to comprehend how such a tragic event could occur. Amy Hensley, grieving the loss of her husband, filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Anthony's employer, Knox Swan and Dog LLC, and the Bay Colony Drive condo complex. The lawsuit claimed that the defendants failed to recognize the dangers posed by the mute swans, which can attack with powerful wings and large bills. According to the suit, a mute swan is one of the heaviest flying birds, with males averaging about 24 to 26 pounds. These birds are known to attack by smashing at their victims with bony spurs in their wings, accompanied by biting with their large bill. Doug Stotts, a senior conservation ecologist with the Field Museum, explained that swans may seem calm and pretty, but they are more aggressive and stronger than people think. "Swans are certainly perfectly happy to attack something that's much larger than them," Stotts said. "It's mama with her babies, and mama with her babies is always ferocious." Steve Sullivan, senior curator of urban ecology for the Chicago Academy of Sciences and its Peggy Notebert Nature Museum, added that swans will fiercely defend their territory, especially to protect their young. "Swans are certainly perfectly happy to attack something that's much larger than them," Sullivan explained. Anthony's employer, Knox Swan and Dog LLC, had placed swans in the pond to keep geese away. This method is commonly used in various locations, but it requires careful management to ensure the safety of both the birds and the people working around them. Amy Hensley's lawsuit pointed out that the property management companies, as well as the homeowners and condominium associations, should have known about the aggressive nature of the mute swans and taken steps to prevent such a tragedy. The lawsuit sought an unspecified amount in damages, claiming premises liability and violations of Illinois' Animal Control Act. This act states that the owner of an animal that attacks a person in certain circumstances can be held liable for damages. The defendants, however, did not comment publicly on the case.